talked to the lady out there.
Ma'am.
She said
Henderson and Hudka. Yeah, I think there actually are some slides that go with that. Do you want to switch, or do you want to just look at my screen? And if you want, I'll just hit the lights for you.
That's fine.
Can you see it okay? Okay.
I'm glad.
Well, whatever works for you. Whew. All right.
At least it's short. I think it
it's a sad day.
What's the second?
Oh, I ended up shaving my mustache.
Oh.
They were saying, they thought I still had the mustache.
It makes, and when I hear things like that, it worries me. Are we ready? Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our Tuesday, September 20th agenda session. We are running just a minute late, coming from strategic planning this afternoon. If I can get a motion on our minutes. Do have a motion on the minutes? Do hear a second. Without objection, the minutes will stand. We have ordinances on final reading. Any council member having any issues that have arisen since first reading, please let me know. If not, we will move into resolutions, community development, and I'll be watching the board for lights if you have any questions about items on tonight's agenda. Council office, police. If not, we will move into purchases. We have 3 purchases this evening. Still seeing no lights. We will move into next week's agenda. If you'll take a look at September 27th, we have a couple of an item on final reading, resolutions, economic development, community development, planning, finance, education and innovation. We do have an item that was added. Joda, would you mind real quickly just explaining item D, please, for next week, since that was added? Yes, sir, for next week under education, the expansion of the early Head Start.
Yeah, so this item has to be listed separately, but the item B is about our expansion of early Head Start grants, which is dollars to provide our providers to expand the number of seats available versus the original item C, which is providing funding for seats that are so this has just been added to reflect the fact that it's different.
Councilwoman Hill, I see your light.
Not in relation to this, it's a different item.
Okay. Are there any questions on item D before we go to Councilwoman Hill's question? All right. Thank you, Joda. Councilwoman, you have the floor.
Yeah, you are moving fast, Chair. I can't flip my fingers that fast. Item 7A for the 2-week agenda under economic development.
7A on the,
2-week agenda,
okay, we're,
page 6.
yep. Can we get, can you hold that thought for real quick and let's get out of the 27th and I'll move into that next, I promise.
The 27th. Oh, it says the 20th. This is the 27th agenda. It just says the 20th on the top.
On the
I'm
top,
sorry.
it does get confusing.
It is
at
in our
times.
2-week agenda though.
Okay,
And that's
yes,
what you
ma'am.
want to talk about now,
Yes,
right?
ma'am. 7A.
Yeah, 7A, it's the resolution for the Parks and Outdoors Department to lease some property on River Street.
Yes, ma'am.
And I'm somewhat abreast of this, but I'd appreciate it if Scott could just fill the whole council in on the why, or Joda, on the why of why we are renting this.
Yes, my understanding, and I think Scott will be able to speak to it a little bit better, is that as Parks and Outdoors space, this is an ideal option given the concept of which I will let Scott fill in.
Because it was my understanding that it may have some benefit to the public being in this space. So
Absolutely, Councilmember. Thank you very much. Fortune has smiled on us, and we have the opportunity to lease the space directly across from our headquarters at Outdoor Chattanooga now, so we'll have a true campus situation. We'll be able to put all of the staff, with the exception of maintenance and rec, in one location. So that's arts, culture, creative economy, events, planning, outdoor recreation, administration, outdoor Chattanooga, one spot. The idea there is synergy through space. And there's a very direct focus there too. We want the energy of the North Shore to permeate from that space. We really want to increase the staff interaction we have as well as we come out of COVID and realize what it's like to work together again and smile, see each other face to face. Those
Okay.
little things.
All right. Thank you very much.
Scott, does that translate into all of our outdoor energy originates from District 2?
It goes everywhere. Councilmember.
No, it just
It's
starts in
omnipotent
District.
If you think about it.
Starts in District 2. Is that what we're saying? All right. Thank you very much for that explanation. Councilwoman Hill, is that okay? Yes, ma'am. Thank you. I think we left off into finance, starting with item E. If you will take a look, Dr. Burrs, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, please. Brent, there are a number of things on finance on page 7 of what's today's agenda. I sure wish we could split those up instead of having everything the 20th. It might be a little more convenient, something to think about. And then on in future considerations, there's a number of finance things. Will we be going over that? I mean, they're brand new to me. I haven't seen them.
The ones for next week or future considerations?
Well, I'm talking about both. I understand the budget things.
Okay,
Got
yeah.
that. But look
I
under
can hit them
finance,
briefly.
E, F, G, and H.
Yeah.
Those you and I haven't reviewed. And so I'm ignorant of them. And then under finance, future considerations, I know we're not there yet, Mr. Chair. The bond stuff.
Yep.
Okay.
So for next week, item E, that's a resolution that simply amends the existing resolution for tool allowance. The existing resolution is old, and we just need to update it to make sure that we properly identify those who are eligible for a tool allowance. The tool allowance was increased this year in the budget ordinance, which is what prompted us to
Sure.
then go back and that resolution is simply to amend the existing resolution to clarify who's eligible for a tool allowance.
Okay.
Item F is, we currently have a resolution on the books that allows the city to accept donations under $25,000 as long as it doesn't put an operational burden on the city. That is in accordance with the prior procurement thresholds of 25,000. So we are asking council to amend that to 50,000 so that this resolution resolution we
Okay.
did for grant acceptance
Okay.
as well as the procurement thresholds. Item G is another resolution amendment. This is a resolution that council approved to send ARP money to Chattanooga 2.0. What we missed on the resolution was the fiscal agent, which was identified in the proposal as the United Way. So this amendment just simply amends the existing resolution to clarify that United Way is the fiscal agent for the funds on behalf of Chattanooga 2.0. And then the fourth item, item H, is a new resolution for distribution of ARP funds to Chattanooga Neighborhood Enterprises for Lyerly Street affordable housing. This was included in the spending plan that you all adopted. We just didn't do a separate resolution for it yet. We're
So
doing
this
that
is
now.
just kind of cleaning up and getting things in order, the language in order with decisions we've already made.
Yes,
Okay. Thank you.
mostly, yes.
Now, I understand Lyerly is different, but I get that. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Burrs. Seeing no other lights, we did leave in finance, moving into planning. Councilwoman Hill, see your light.
Thank you, Chairman. This planning item is actually on the agenda for today. I missed the gunshot when we were into this because somebody left the seat up, so it took me a little bit longer to get here. But planning item 6A, case number 0180, Lee Helena. This is in District 8, and my understanding is this case may be withdrawn. Is that correct, Councilwoman Knoll? This is on today's agenda. It
Oh,
is
okay, hang on.
under, it's a first reading under planning. Yes, ma'am. The first item, 180.
I am not. Let me see, wait a minute. I am not aware of, is that on the MLK?
No, this is on Mulberry Street. Okay, so
Is this case 0180?
yes.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not aware of it being.
Okay, all right.
Not to my knowledge.
I'll double check my email, make sure that I've got that correct. But I have a note that I'd made myself this morning with that, so. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Going back to the 27th, we left off under planning item. We have police and we have 2 public works items on the agenda. That will conclude, seeing no lights, that will conclude the 27th. If you will, take a quick look at future considerations and let me know if you have any questions on future considerations. And we will get those answers addressed or get the ball rolling in that direction. Madam Vice Chair, I see your light. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I did have a question for item, just some clarified questions for item 1C and then also under finance. In regards to item C, could you explain what policies that we'll be amending?
So I'll move it down a little bit. So the item around item B was that your question, Councilwoman?
Yes.
Yes. So that would be an item that we haven't. I think the day may change. I'll defer to Councilwoman Burrs on that item, but that would be the Airport Inn that we purchased, and I think we are.
Joda, I'm sorry. It's C. It's item 1C.
Oh, 1C, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Item C is around the TIF policies and procedures, which is, I believe Jermaine covered that last time, but I'll try to faithfully recall. But basically, this is about bringing our TIF policy in line with state law surrounding everything from the percentage of the administration fee, which I believe is currently at 25 basis points, and then would move from that to 2% to accommodate the amount of work that goes into every TIF, as well as the years that TIFs would be allowed to cover, as well as the housing item to allow TIFs to include low income and affordable housing in the usage of those dollars. Oh, yes, and it also increases the application fee.
All right. Thank you so much. And then under finance, item D, resolution to amend, and what items are, or what is being amended in that policy? And I know we talked about it earlier as far as it all kind of being one package there.
Yeah, so I'll start from the top with these 4 items because they're all related. The first item is a master bond resolution. So I'll go back a little ways. Several months ago, this council approved for the administration to apply for a WIFIA loan from the EPA for sewer wastewater infrastructure. And now we are at the point where we're nearing the finish line to actually get the loan. So in order to do this, and I wanted to go ahead and get it on future consideration because it is a large dollar amount, but it's also a lot of things that we will bring to you at once on October 18th. The first one's a master bond resolution, which authorizes and provides for the issuance and sale of sewer revenue bonds, which we don't currently have in place. So council will need to put this resolution in place. It also provides for the collection and disposition of revenues from the sewer system, as well as making provision for operation of the sewer system. So this master bond resolution, which has been prepared by our outside attorney, and we can do a presentation for it, and we can have the attorney come if you like. But that master bond resolution is what allows us to move forward. The second item is a supplemental bond resolution, where council would approve the actual WIFIA term sheet, as well as a loan agreement. The third item is authorization to actually issue a single sewer revenue bond, which is the mechanism that we use to get the loan from the EPA. So the master bond resolution, the supplemental resolution, and then the resolution authorizing issuance of that single revenue bond are all the three items required to get the $186 million loan from the EPA. The last item, which is amending our debt management time to time. I think the last time we did it, I don't know if you remember, Dr. Burrs. I mean, it's been several years since we amended the debt management policy, but the amendment is necessary to allow for us to have the WIFIA loan, because that type of loan is not specifically considered in our current debt management. That will also have to be updated in order to get the loan.
Can we talk further about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's however you all want to proceed. I mean, we could do if you want to do a committee or during a session, we could do a full presentation. The WIFIA loan, when we presented it back, when we asked for approval to apply, there's 4 specific projects that will be funded with $186 million. Some of those are consent decree specific, some of those are consent decree related, and some of those support the consent decree overall. But they're 4 pretty critical projects, and this funding is low cost funding as we can get.
I'm not against that.
Yeah.
if I may.
Hit your light. Hang on one second. Madam Vice Chair, you good?
I'm good, yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
Hit your light, Dr. Burrs, please, so we can hear you.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. I want to know how we're amending our debt policy.
Oh.
I just
Yeah.
want to know about that and
Yeah,
make
and-
sure there's no unintended
So
consequences.
by the time these are getting close to actually landing on the agenda, we will have full attachments for all of this.
Oh,
I simply
okay.
wanted to, I mean, it's a month away, and I wanted to just get it out there for your consideration so you knew it was coming. I didn't want to
Okay.
surprise you 2 weeks ahead of time with a $186 million loan.
Yeah, no, I'm in favor of
but
it. I
We
just,
appreciate that, Brent.
yeah,
The debt management amendment is going to be very short and simple. It will simply change our policy to allow for this type of debt that currently is not considered because we've never done it before.
okay. Just more discussion.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dr.
I
Burrs.
do.
Oh, absolutely. Go ahead.
On Joda alluded to it. The surplus property. and October 4th. It's on. It's not going to happen on the 4th.
What item is that number?
Under economic development, B. It will happen, but not the, it's just the date.
Hmm.
Get rid of the date,
Okay.
please.
Understood. Thank you. Does that end your questions, ma'am?
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
fine.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or concerns on future considerations? Brent, I do appreciate you throwing some of those items out in advance, which gives us a warning to start thinking and digging and doing the research. I think that's very transparent of you, sir. Thank you. All right. Any other questions for future considerations? Then if not, we have no department reports on our agenda this afternoon, but we do have a committee's report with Parks and Public Works with a presentation from Councilman Henderson. And I believe Mr. Hudka, if both of you are working on that together. Okay, so then we will adjourn into Parks and Public Works, which I believe, Madam Vice Chair, you have taken the reins on that this afternoon. And I'll watch the board for you.
Thank you so much. Yes.
ma'am.
Councilman Councilman Hester is out for this meeting, so he's asked me to chair it for him, and it is my pleasure. So I'll call the Parks and Public Works Committee meeting to order. I have a motion on the minutes. Have a second? Do we need one? Okay. All right, Madam Clerk, if you can read Resolution 7C.
Sisters Bluegrass Festival held in Chattanooga, Green, and Ross's Landing for dates of September 29th, 30th, and October 1st, 2022, in the amount of $8,500, which includes $4,000 in deposits and $4,500 in rental fees.
All right. Madam Clerk, would you read the alternate version?
A resolution authorizing the waiver of park rental fees for Chattanooga Presents in support of Three Sisters Bluegrass Festival held in Chattanooga, Green, and Ross's Landing for the dates of September 29th, 30th, and October 1st, 2022, in the amount of $4,500 in rental fees.
All right, we'll be going with the alternate version. Any questions or discussion? Okay, and I believe the alternate version removes the deposit, if I'm not mistaken. The deposit's out, which is good. All right, Madam Clerk, would you read item 7D, the alternate version?
A resolution authorizing the waiver of park rental fees for Tennessee Valley Pride in support of Pride Festival held in Chattanooga, Green, and Ross's Landing in the dates of October 2nd and 3rd, 2022, in the amount of $2,500 in rental fees.
All right, any questions or discussion? All right, and that also removes the deposit from that one as well. Madam Clerk, would you read item 7K?
A resolution authorizing the administrator for the Department of Public Works to award contract number W22003-201 Aquarium and William Street cleaning contract for cleaning and wastewater pipes to Ace Pipe Cleaning, Inc., Kansas City, Missouri, in the amount of $78,280 with a contingency in the amount of $8,000 for a total amount of $86,280.
All right, that one is in District 7. I don't have any comments. Any comments or questions?
Seeing none.
All right. Madam Clerk, could you read item 7L?
A resolution to amend resolution number 31132 to increase the estimated amount of $250,000 for the roof inspections, repairs, and maintenance on-call blanket contract number E19011-202 with Porter Roofing Contractors, Inc. of Morrison, Tennessee, and Tri-State Roofing Contractors, LLC of Chattanooga, Tennessee, due to additional contract utilization at the Development Resource Center, Will Advantage Center, South Chattanooga Community Center, Washington Hills Community Center, and Bessie Smith Cultural Center for use by all departments for a revised estimated amount of $500,000.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? All right, thank you. Now we will have a presentation about the sewer lateral ordinance. That's Councilman Henderson and Tom Hucka. All right, turn it over.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just by, I guess, way of introduction, let me just make sure everybody understands what a sewer lateral is. So you have your sewer mains that typically run down the middle of a street or road, and then your sewer laterals branch off to each individual houses. And really what brought this about was probably a little over a year ago. I was contacted by a resident who had a sewer lateral failure under a right-of-way in the street. And these can be quite expensive for a homeowner, anywhere from $10,000 up to $20,000 or $25,000. Even the little supplemental insurance policies that you can purchase does not cover the sewer lateral under a road, under a right-of-way. So I brought this to the attention of Mr. Hutka and the administration, and thankfully they were very much in favor of the amendment to this ordinance, and I'm asked the attorney to send everyone a red line version and then a clean version. And of all the red that you see in this ordinance, mine was a one-liner, and it was simply that the sanitary sewer service lines of a 4-inch or smaller within the right-of-way of a dedicated and accepted public street shall be the responsibility of the city. The rest of it is Mr. Hucka's.
Well,
So Mr. Hucka, if you'd like to take it from there and maybe explain the rest of it, but basically what it does is any sewer lateral failure that occurs under a city right of way, whether it be a street, a sidewalk, or whatever, will now become the responsibility of the city to pay for, rather than placing that burden on our citizens. they plan for the maintenance of a roof or painting their house, or no one ever thinks about having a sewer lateral failure. And it can be quite expensive and in many cases, maybe even catastrophic to a household. So I appreciate the administration being so enthusiastic about getting behind this. I'll turn it over to Mr. Hutka, and you can explain some of the further details that took us nearly a year to compile the amendment to the ordinance.
And I'm only, thank you, Councilman. I'm only up here for a second because I wanted to point out a couple more things to verify our strong recommendation for the ordinance change, and to thank a few people who are too humble to thank themselves. So, and then we'll turn over to Bill for the actual detail. But I'd like to point out that there are a lot of benefits to this ordinance revision in the operation of our wastewater system. And it also puts us into line with the standard pretty much across the country. This was a unique situation. That said, I'd like to thank Bill Payne and Mark Heinzer and the wastewater staff, Phil Noblet, who worked through all the details over a few months, and also Councilman Henderson, who is our driving force through all this. So that said, I'm going to turn over to Bill, who knows all the details better than I do.
Thank you, Mr. Hutka. Thank you, Council. Also like to thank Interim Director Mark Heinzer, Assistant Director for Wastewater Engineering Tony Kinder, and Assistant Director for Wastewater Administration Justin Steinman. They worked with me extensively and helped me pull through a lot of the grunt work. This will be brief, try to cover a few items, mostly to let you know what is changing, go over a few things that are not changing, give you a little bit of information about what is this going to look like for the customer, and then also give you some information about what is the city process going forward, about how we're going to be able to approach this and handle these items. So there's two sections that have proposed changes. They are section 31-4, which really is the meat of what is the lateral, whose responsibility is it, where is it, and exactly how all those components come together. And then because we were making the change in 31-4, as we reviewed the other sections of chapter 31, we found there was a spot in section 31-14, which has to do with common sewer laterals where multiple properties have been tied together in the past. And there are times when those homes have to separate. And so we wanted to make sure and change it so that the connection point for those people when they make those separations in the future is also the same, so that it's at the right of way. So that's what you'll see in 31-14. It's really a minor adjustment in order to make sense with the changes in 31-4. So what are we changing in 31-4? The city will repair or replace a broken or damaged lateral, which is 4 inches in size or smaller, if it's inside the city right of way. Pretty straightforward. It's either a 4-inch lateral or it's not. It's either inside the right of way or it's not. It's either broken and damaged, or it just needs to have a blockage cleared out of it. So things that we will ask a customer to do, we will, of course, they will be the first ones who are going to recognize that there's a problem that goes on, because they'll notice that whenever they're using their fixtures, whether it's their toilets or sinks. They will, of course, have the first opportunity to be able to contact a plumber, be able to come out and figure out what's going on with that situation. And if the plumber is able to clear that blockage out of the line, then they should go right ahead and do that. And that would continue to be their customer's responsibility moving forward. If they determine that there's some sort of break or damage in there, then at that point, the plumber can just easily get a video of that section. So that way they can submit that to us. That way we don't have to go out and do any further additional investigation for that. So that way we already know where the repair needs to be made. Part of that also in making sure, how do we know exactly where it is? So for example, when you come from the house or you come from a particular spot, where is that connection point? So city standards have long required a clean out at the property line. In some cases, those clean outs were provided by the city. In other cases, those clean outs may have either gotten buried or they were not installed at the time that an earlier property owner tied on. So it may be necessary for a property owner to go ahead and have that clean out installed. So that way there's a clear spot of everybody understands where the private property starts and stops versus the right of way. So things that are not changing inside chapter 31-4, if the break in the lateral is on the private property, so it's outside of the right of way and it's on their private property, whether it's in an easement or if it's just is in the center of their yard, that will continue to be the property owner's responsibility. If there are laterals that are larger than 4 inches in diameter, these, and just so we all have a clear understanding, those are very large water users. We're talking about multi-building, multi-family apartment complexes. We're talking about large commercial entities. We're talking about industrial sites, right? So those users would still have responsibility for their line, for their lateral all the way to the main. And laterals, well, I already covered the third bullet. I managed to sort of cover all those together in that spot. So one of the things to consider for this is we know that there are some houses that over time a residential area may have gone somewhat commercial. There may be some houses that used to be residential that may now have small businesses in them. They still have the same 4-inch lateral that they always had before when it was a residential house. In many cases, they have a lot of the same fixtures. There's not going to be any distinction in this at all about land use. So if just because it happens to be a business, it's not going to put any additional undue burden on a small business just because they happen to be a business operating in what effectively is the size and configuration of a home. So just to help reinforce that point, that this is all about the size of the lateral and not about the particular use on the property.
Thank you, Chairwoman. When Thomas stood up to talk about this, he mentioned that this would be good for the city. It's in the best interest of our city. Can you expand on why making these changes is in our best interest?
Sure. There's a couple of really major points. First and foremost has to do with the customer. Currently, as anyone who has a property, single family home or something like that, they're familiar with the fact that water meters are placed for their domestic water service is placed at the water meter. This basically will bring that in line so that way the same expectation is there for their wastewater service, so that everything up to, in the case of water delivery, it's everything bringing the water to their property. In the case of the wastewater side, it's actually the opposite, which is how does that water get taken away? So it's their responsibility to get it to the property line. It keeps a very clear line of demarcation there for the customer. So that way it's not a difference based on which way the water flows. And then secondly, and just as importantly for the city in terms of infrastructure maintenance, one of the things which is always difficult and it's part of what drives up some of the cost as Councilman Henderson alluded to, has to do with how does the street get repaired.
Mm-hmm.
And so as we continue to do more and more in making sure that streets are properly repaired and that everyone making a street cut is repairing that street properly, this will make sure that the city is the one that is out there fixing the streets, so that whenever it's necessary to dig down and make that point repair, cut that lateral, or even replace the entire section if that's what's necessary, then at that point, we're making sure that the road network itself stays that way. And so it's in the city's best interest really to go ahead and make sure that the right repair is made on the pipe, including everything above the pipe, as opposed to trying to simply patch up the pipe by finding some additional way. We'll just clear it up and it's okay. And in the meantime, that backfill continues to fall into the pipe and it eventually creates sinkholes and potholes on the surface, even though it may be some years later. But those are the two biggest issues.
Okay. So I really appreciate the one sentence that Councilman Henderson added to this ordinance, and I would like to be his co-sponsor in that sentence and in this ordinance, because you all have heard from one of my constituents who has suffered from this very thing. And I have another gentleman who's asking, when is the sinkhole in the middle of my street going to be fixed? I mean, this is a common problem throughout portions of our city that were developed at given times, right? That are just sort of aging out with their sewer infrastructure and wastewater infrastructure. So I wonder, what do you all anticipate is the fiscal reality of us changing this ordinance to making this the responsibility of the city? And how will that potentially, how and when could it potentially impact wastewater fees?
So for this year, so we expect that this ordinance would take effect, obviously, quickly after passage, but we don't expect any effect in rates this year, and any change for next year would be negligible.
Okay.
And then,
But for the families that are impacted, I mean, it will be dramatic. But citywide, we won't see a significant change. That's great. Okay.
That's
Well,
correct.
I'd say that's a win-win-win. All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate everybody's work on this.
sorry.
Hey, Bill, real quick. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Can you go back one slide? I just had a logistical question on the clean out prior to city repairs. So the clean out is the responsibility of the homeowner. Can you explain who does what during the repair process? And
Sure.
does that make sense?
Sure,
What I asked?
absolutely. So if there's already a clean out at the property line, then there's probably not anything that the property owner will need to do. Now, part of that comes down to what type of clean out, because there is part of the language in the ordinance specifically calls that a bidirectional clean out. What does that mean? It means that it's easy for the plumber to clean but in both directions, because there's actually a curve that's in that. So in some cases, older style clean outs only went one direction, and so they only went downstream. So there may be times when, for the property owner's perspective, it's important for them to have one that goes back towards their property to clean their side of the line. That would be something that the customer would have to look at. From our perspective, we have included that a bidirectional clean out is what should be installed. But as long as it is facing downstream, headed towards the main, then that will serve the city's purposes in terms of doing that. But so in coming back to your question about process would be a customer realizes they have a problem. They call a plumber. The plumber says, "I'm trying to clean out the line and I'm not able to clear the blockage."
Mhm.
Then their next step would be, as the plumber, go ahead and insert a video camera in order to be able to determine where that is. Is it 10 feet down from the clean out? Is it 27 feet down from the clean out? And then at that point, they make a tape and they make that recording. And we will have a process for them to be able to make that submission to the city. That way, we already have that information, and it speeds up the repair time for us to either have our crews or a contractor actually go out and make that repair at that point.
Okay, so for those of us who aren't Bill Payne, every house has a clean out?
Every house should have a clean out.
I understand.
Not every house will be able to find their clean out. And there may
Uh-huh.
be some houses, depending on how the connection was made, that somebody may have skipped that step many years ago, because today there's an absolute requirement that when the new sewers are put in, the clean out is always there.
And a clean out is identified sometimes as almost like a white PVC pipe with a cap on it. You see those in the sidewalk sometimes.
That's right.
That's what a clean out is.
Correct.
Okay.
And there may be more than one on a property, but typically from the city's perspective, we like to see one at the property line. It provides a couple of things. When a plumber is making a connection, they know exactly where to go dig in the yard, and they can find it. And it's a spot where they say, if I dig here, I know I'll find the line, as opposed to having to guess and dig up a big part of the yard.
And some of the breakage, because this is fascinating, and Councilman Henson, thank you for your work on this. I know you've talked about this before, but for example, the weight of heavy trucks coming through, I mean, some of that can compound over time and cause a failure in the right of way. Can I assume that? I'm just using that as one example, but.
Sure. And most of the time what happens is there's been some other defect in the line. For example, there was a small crack, there was a small break, a joint that didn't seal properly. And over time, water may seep through and it takes small pieces of the soil with it, and that creates a void. And then over time, that heavy truck or whatever is above then can compress that down. And that's what creates that depression on the surface. But as long as everything stays sealed and stays well maintained and there's good compaction of everything above the pipe, then we really shouldn't see any issues
Right.
above. So a lot of times those places we see in the pavement are really the result of a defect in the line.
Okay. And some of these failures, or a lot of these failures, could be catastrophic. I think you alluded to $20,000. That could be absolutely catastrophic
And there
to
are-
something you had no control over. So I appreciate this legislation a lot and what it's doing.
And there are certain property owners, for example, a property owner at a cul-de-sac, if the line's in the center,
Right.
there's more pavement for a property owner at the cul-de-sac to have to dig through.
Yeah.
In order to be able to get to the main sometimes than a property owner that's just on a straight section of the roadway. And that just has to do with the configuration and that larger turning radius. So it can certainly get expensive.
And this gives the city an opportunity to also take a look instead of relying on others to do the work and maybe identify some things that could be problematic even in the future. Once you're in there making the repairs.
Yes, it does.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Henderson.
All right, Chairman Henderson, Councilman Henderson, sorry.
That's it. I'm out.
Thank you. Bill, thank you for all your work on this. And I know it was tedious, trying to go over every little small thing. And I want to thank you and all of your crew, Tom and Chief. I don't know if you'd like to say anything, but I certainly appreciate the administration wholeheartedly being in favor of this and supporting this as well. I know that was something that I think that the mayor felt very strongly that we needed to do this for our citizens.
Yes, Councilman. And thank you for your leadership and bringing this before this council. You know, we see this as a clear win for residents and the city alike. And for us to be able to very clearly solve a problem that could, in some cases, put people out of a home and also make sure that our streets are in better condition, that's a win-win for everybody. So thank you, Councilman, for bringing this forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Or let me ask you this.
We're ready to.
Are
go
we
ahead.
ready to put it on the agenda?
I'll leave that,
Well, I mean,
I'll leave
you
that
know,
to our committee chair at the moment.
All right. Any objection to moving this to our agenda, our 2-week agenda? Any objection to it? All right. And I'm in favor of it too. Thank you so much for working on it. I have a constituent that wish we would have did this a year ago. So thank you for working on that. Thank you, Bill, and everyone else who worked on that as well. Any other questions or comments? All right. Seeing none, I adjourn till 6. Thank you. Hey, dear, I'm in charge.